diesel. Obviously, as you guys have seen, we're running completely through the radio remote control with two other running functions outside of this. You have a tether plug-in that goes straight to the box, and then your third would be manually moving it from the valve stack. Please don't ever try and attempt that. At that point, call us. We'll have a certified tech come up to move the machine that way if you're stuck in that scenario. How many of you guys have ran a Bandit chipper before, or just a chipper in general?
Chipper, yes.
Perfect, so everyone here. So really all this is, guys, it's literally just a towable machine on a rubber track undercarriage with a little different setup. Your winch controls are going to be a little bit different as well. So with that being said, we'll start on the remote. Let's go ahead, let's jump on the front of the machine, and then we'll kind of work our way around. Another question for you guys, are you guys responsible for the maintenance of this machine, or do you have crews coming up doing that? It's you guys?
Yeah.
Perfect. And we're going to go in depth over everything. Like I said, at that point, if you guys have questions, please feel free to stop and ask. So we'll jump up there. Now, have you guys had a chance to play around with this remote much as far as moving it around, or is this your first time? Just you? Okay, perfect. So it's real simple control, guys. All your computers are going to be talking through this box here that you see here. So you do want to protect this at all costs. That's the actual computer that's linking up to our remote, that's connecting everything together. I was talking about your second operation control. Let me jump in the toolbox here. So if that radio remote goes down, guys, you have a secondary control. This tether cord is going to plug into the top of the box up here. This end here, you're going to unplug this side. That's going to plug in there. You're going to run your machine through this remote. As little as possible, we want to actually run the machine with this remote. Just to give you guys an idea, this cord alone is about $800. This box is about $2,000. That remote's about $6,000. You need to be extremely cautious when you're operating this machine, obviously. With that being said, a lot of times with this tether, when you're actually forced to run it with this setup here, it's a 30-foot cable. A lot of times guys are off running it to the side, which is the proper way to run it. They move the machine, run this cord over with the machine. Now you're calling us to move it from the valve stack on the back of the machine. This is nothing more than a fail-safe if that radio remote goes down. Common things we see in the field, logs falling on this, machine running the remote over, battery's dead, you forget to turn it off at the end of the day, then you're forced into that tether remote backup. It's real simple control, guys. This white button here in the middle, you hold that for 1 second, that's going to turn that remote on. 3 seconds is going to turn it off. Please make sure at the end of the day or lunch, whatever the case may be, you're actually turning this remote off. It's very easy to shut the machine off, leave the remote on, stick it on the machine, and walk away. So you're going to come back to a dead remote. You do have 2 chargers for this remote. It's going to plug in on the top here. You have a car charger and then a wall charger to plug in the office. At the end of the day, when you're coming home from the job, just throw this onto the charger, let it charge overnight, so you're good to go in the morning. Emergency stop up here. This is going to override everything on the machine. You hit this, it's going to shut the machine completely down no matter what the situation is. Please only use this for emergency situations. If you hit that, guys, your clutch is still going to be in gear. So, you know, as quickly as possible, make sure that emergency is controlled, everyone is safe, cleared out of the way. Then as quickly as possible, get up here, disengage that clutch as quickly as possible. So you guys know, running these chippers, your clutch is essentially the lifeline of the machine. Your clutch fails, the machine's not going to work. So that being said, as little as possible, we actually want to use this emergency stop. When we link this remote up, if you ever go and you link it up to radio and the machine shuts off right away, that just means your emergency stop is pushed down. You want to see green on that emergency stop. When you see green, that means it's up, you're good to go. So I'm going to act like we started the machine up. Your remote is linking up. To move the machine forward and backward from your drive, you have to hold either enable button on the top. It doesn't matter which one, just one of them has to be held. Then your 2 biggest toggles are going to run independent track controls. So you can turn it on a 180-degree turn on itself. If you guys kind of want to close in, we'll go over the remote functions. You have 4 different tracking speeds on this remote. So you have a high gear, low gear, and then creep on, creep off. Anytime you're going through a real tight area, I recommend you turn that creep on. It's going to get you real slow controls to where you can really you know, get that through fine areas. Loading it onto trailers, that typically is best to keep it on creep. When you're in track speed high, what you guys are going to find is this machine will not turn. It's going to deadhead for about 1 second. It'll kind of give you a little bit, then it's going to sit there and it's going to stall out. A lot of guys think that's a problem. That's how these cat undercarriages are designed. If that happens, you need to turn it. Just turn it out of high gear. The machine's going to turn no problem for you. Feed forward and reverse. This is going to run your hydraulics for the back of the infeed tray. You do have 2 overrides on this machine that we'll go over when we're on the back of the unit, as far as your control bar and your hydraulic bump bar down on the bottom. So feed forward, that's going to run your feed system forward. Feed reverse, clear the system out. If something jams up, someone's in harm's way. Yoke up and down, that's going to run our slide box on the back there for your feed system. Discharge up and down, this is a dead switch on this machine, so this bottom one here, this bottom green one's not going to do anything. Throttle up and down controls your throttle. Flipper up and down is going to control our flipper here on the end of the chute. Discharge counterclockwise and clockwise, that's going to spin this discharge either way you want it. It is a 270-degree discharge, so it's not going to go all the way around, just so you don't damage that lift cylinder on the back. Auxiliary, this is a dead switch as well. This would be if you wired in a light system, water system, something of that nature. That's what that auxiliary is for. Your winch in and out is going to run your winch rope on the back of the unit. I know we kind of just quickly touched on this. Do you guys have any questions on the basic functions on this remote? Perfect. Then I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to shut this off here for a second, guys. Leave that here. So going over our actual startup on the machine, it's going to be broken down on this sticker here on the inside of this box. Just something to keep in mind, guys. Anytime we're chipping, moving the machine, parking it, washing it, whatever it may be, please keep this box closed. These panels do not like long exposure to the sun, nor do they like water on them. And dust obviously is not going to be its friend. So turn the key to the on position. So you have 3 start positions. You have off, on, and start. If I go straight from off to start, it's going to lock this key. You're going to have to shut the key back to off and restart that cycle up. So just turn it to on. You're going to hear the fuel pump start up. Bandit Chippers appears on the screen. Once that disappears and you see all your gauges, you're good to go. If there was something preventing us from running, for example, we have the hood pin up top on the knife housing. If that hood pin is unplugged, there's going to be a little sensor here flashing. It looks like a half circle with an X through it. The machine's not going to start up. That's just telling you that your hood pin is unplugged up top. So turn the key, I'll start it up here and then I'll shut it down for a second. I'll go ahead, I'll shut that down. Now this is one of the key factors, guys, on these tier 4 final systems. Anytime we shut this key down, we need to allow 15 to 20 seconds for a complete shutdown before we restart that cycle up. In that 15 to 20 seconds, you have DEF fluid in that DEF tank that's sending to the engine. In those 15 to 20 seconds, you could hear it right now, that humming, it's sending that fluid back into the tank so it doesn't sit in that line and crystallize and ruin those DEF lines. So wait 15 to 20 seconds. If you don't, it's going to throw a code 639-9. It's not going to prevent the machine from running. It's just going to let you know, hey, there was a incomplete shutdown on the machine. It'll store as an active code on the machine. So going back to our screen. So again, once we see all of our gauges, reading the screen here, guys, we have RPM reading in the top left, battery voltage bottom left, temperature bottom right, PSI top right. Up top, we have feed speed 1. We have DEF reading right in the middle, and then we have an hour reading right below that. And then below the hour, above the mode, you see here it says manual. Then you have 4 button controls from right to left. You have maintenance mode, purge, and menu. So your 4 main gauges, guys, that's just telling you the readings on the engine. Nothing crucial that you guys need to know outside of your RPM. You do have temperature shutdowns on the engine to where if it's overheating, it's going to shut itself off, kind of like your truck would. At that point, it's going to be throwing a code. So to check codes, guys, this is a Caterpillar engine, so any codes being thrown, you can call Caline, you can call Mike at RKU. Unfortunately, our hands are tied as far as what we can do with this engine. Caterpillar is the only manufacturer that can work on this engine. Any Bandit related issue, you call us, we're going to get you taken care of. Caterpillar, we have to refer you direct to Cat to come do that work. So in this scenario that a code is being thrown, I'm going to show you how to check that, just so we see. Your far left button for menu, when you click that, you're going to get a new set of buttons. Our middle button is now a triangle with an exclamation point, active faults, and then stored faults. So active faults is anything being thrown on this computer right now that is an active fault. Stored fault just means it's happened on the computer at some point of the machine's lifeline. So it could have been 0 hours when Bandit was assembling the machine. It could have been, 100 hours down the road. So those unfortunately don't mean much to us. From your menu, since we're on that button, guys, you do have auto regens on this engine on the Tier 4 Final, so you don't have to force any regens. You would do that through that button, but we don't need to worry about that anymore. You can adjust things like your brightness, your language, anything related directly to the screen from that menu button. Going back, purge, same thing. It's an auto regen, so we don't have to purge this engine anymore. If you guys are familiar with diesel engines and how California was working, on the Tier 4s and the Tier 4i Flexes, you had to do manual regens. A lot of guys, majority of industries, not just the tree industry, weren't actually forcing these engines into regens. They were clogging DPF filters, blowing engines up. So now Tier 4 Final engines, it goes into an auto regen, cleans itself off on its own to where you won't even notice it.
Does this have to run for so long to complete a regen?
It does at high temperature. If it doesn't get to that temperature, it's not going to do the regen.
Like if you only chip for 20 minutes, is that going to be a problem?
No. It'll be when it needs to regen, it's going to go. On your mode, guys, so when we start this machine up, you have manual. Again, manual would be running it through the valve stacks, actually physically opening those valves up. So to get linked up to our radio remote, you're going to hit that that mode button right in the middle. Again, we're going to come to a new screen. It says manual, radio, tether. We're going to hit that middle mode button one more time. That's going to drop us down to radio. If the machine was started, this remote's on, we're now linked up to this radio. You go one more, that's going to shoot us down to tether. Now, if you go tether and this cord here is plugged into your radio remote, it's going to flash for about 3 seconds and then it's going to shut the machine off because it's trying to communicate to that tether remote. Even though it's linked up to the radio, it's just going to make you restart that system to link it properly to the radio remote. From that button still, guys, you can see now it's blinking tether there and that no start symbol is popping up. So we'll bring you back to manual. Again, going to that mode function, you have 2 more controls you could get to from that mode button. Down in the bottom left, we now have feed speed. So we have feed speed 1, 2, and 3, and we can play with these before we take off to preset them how you guys like them. That's essentially, it's a hydraulic flow control for how fast your feed wheels spin to control how fast that machine's pulling the wood in. So 1 is probably set, the way Bandit sets them out of the factory, is probably set at 50%. 2 is probably at 65%, 3 is probably at 100%. So we can play with those. I'll show you guys how. That way, when you get this thing out in the woods, if you say, hey, this thing is aggressively pulling wood in, we could slow it down to where it's real fine and easy on the cruise chipping. Bypass, so now second button from the right. So now you see behind that, it's flashing AF bypass C mode. What you did by pushing that bypass button is you turned off the auto feed on the machine. So if you guys have ran, obviously, a newer chipper, which I'm assuming everyone here has, every new chipper has auto feed built into it, reversing auto feed. So it's programmed to where this engine, let's say, is running at 2200 RPMs. Your feed wheels aren't going to start spinning until you get to full throttle at 2200 RPMs. When you put a 12-inch log through this machine, it drops it down, let's say, set to 1800 RPMs. When it drops down to 1800 RPMs, it's going to back the wood out of the feed system, pick the engine back up, then continue to feed itself. When we bypass that system, you just turn that off. So essentially the machine's going to feed itself till it kills itself. You never want a chip like that.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Hunter, I have a question that you may or may not have covered. If you have operated this machine today and you were using that remote, and then you want to go use it tomorrow, do you have to automatically go back into that screen and reactivate that every time?
Yep. Anytime we shut the machine off, guys, it's going to automatically kick us back to manual, so you need to link it back.
So
up
can
to
you go over that real slowly on how to do that part of it? Now, here you are in the morning, you're coming out.
Yep. So you start the machine up. Right now we're in manual, so we're going to hit this middle button here on mode. We're gonna hit that button one more time, drop this arrow down to the radio function. If the machine was started, remote is on, we're now linked up to that radio remote.
And can you bypass that so it's always on radio, or does it?
No.
No.
It's
a
always gonna
safety
kick.
device.
Yep. That way, say that radio remote's dead, then you could go manual or tether functions on that. Yep. So going back here, guys, to that screen. Does that auto feed bypass make sense?
Yeah.
Perfect. Basically, what I'm trying to get across with that, don't mess with that bypass button. It's got auto feed for a reason. Let the machine perform how it's supposed to. Those are our only functions through that mode. So I'm going to go back to the main screen. Your maintenance, if you keep clicking this maintenance button, you're going to come across to a password. We'll go over this at the end. We don't necessarily like giving that password out just because then anyone could go in and mess with those auto feed settings. But my understanding, you guys are all the crew leaders, correct? Perfect. No?
There's a couple of things.
Hey, you guys close your ears. Get out of here. Turn around. No, there's functions in there, guys. It's not the end of the world. But that's going to control our auto feed settings. It's going to control our track speeds. So if you guys take this out, you're tracking it a mile down a straight road and you notice it's pulling one way or the other, you could get in, you can adjust our percentages to where you're going to increase your right track percentage or your left track, that way it goes straight. Also, we're going to adjust our feed speeds in there, going back to that feed speed 1, feed speed 2, feed speed 3. That's where you'd control it from in there. So we'll go over that at the end. From here, guys, just these 3 toggles here, throttle up and down. That's a manual throttle up. You have the one on the remote here. Fuel save on and off. Please leave this switch on off. The idea behind the fuel save, again, going back to those Tier 4i engines, with that auto regen on this Tier 4 final, the idea behind the fuel save is if this engine was running at full throttle for 2 minutes and it didn't sense any load on the engine, it would idle itself back down. Well, now, like we talked about, this engine's going to kick into an auto regen without you even noticing. So what was happening is the engine was in the middle of a regen. The engine would idle itself down on its own. It wouldn't get to complete that regen. It was just causing too many problems. So Caterpillar got rid of that option. So just leave that on off. It's not going to harm anything on off. Zen auxiliary, that is a dead switch right now. It's the same switch as this up here. Nothing wired to it. You do have a little fuse box up here just for simple fuses. There's a sticker on the inside that breaks down that fuse box if you need to get in there. Close that up. Any questions on this control box or that remote, guys? Pretty simple. A lot easier once you actually get some time on it. So coming back here, guys, we want to start wrapping around. Now, with everyone having experience on a chipper, this should just be a refresher, but I'm going to cover it either way because it is the most important function on the machine, and that's referring to our clutch up there. So as you guys know, you have 4 main components on this chipper that's actually doing your chipping, that's your maintenance items. You have your clutch, your belts, your knives, and your anvil. Those are your big 4. To where if one of those is out of whack, the machine's not going to perform like it needs to. So the first one we're going to talk about here is our NACD spring-loaded clutch. Now, if you guys are used to older style Bandits, Vermeers, Morbarks, whatever it may be, they all have the same idea, minus the Vermeers. Those are a little different system. If you're used to an older Bandit, you're used to down, you're locking this clutch up to where it would take your body weight to lock that clutch into place. This is a little different setup. Up is disengaged, we're dropping down into gear, and it's spring loaded. So it's not gonna take our body weight to lock this clutch in. What I mean by that is when this handle goes, it's gonna go. If you've ever ran a chipper before, you know that is the exact opposite of how you wanna engage a clutch. Please follow this sticker here. There's not a more true sticker on this machine. It says do not engage the clutch above an idle or disengage the clutch above an idle. It shows an operator dumping the clutch in at full throttle, dollar bills coming out of the exhaust. That's essentially what you're doing to this clutch when you engage it above an idle. The proper way to engage this clutch, guys, now you saw when we whacked that in, that thing goes down quick. There's a lot of pressure on that clutch plate. So standing here, you want to hold your body weight against that handle because it's going to want to shoot down on you. So at an idle, we're going to use what's called the bump method. To right about here, you're going to hear those plates catching. That engine RPM is going to drop down a little bit. You want to bump this handle about 3 to 5 times. Allow that drum some inertia. Once that engine stops dropping down while you're engaging, you're simply going to put that down, throttle up, start chipping. Now when we fire the machine up at the end, I'll do that again in action so you guys can actually hear what it sounds like. A common mistake we see guys make is you take it and you just slowly force that clutch into play. You put the handle down, start going. It's better than just dropping it in, but you are causing that clutch to get hot very quickly. Essentially guys, if we were to have clear plexiglass looking into here and this whole system here of how this is working, when we start this engine up, you have a fly plate on the back of this machine running at 800 RPMs as soon as we start that key up. Your clutch, your belt, and your drum are at a dead stop. It says 0 RPMs. When we're putting this handle together, we're pushing those plates together to connect them to get to 800 RPMs. So if you just take it and you jam it shut, it's gonna kill the machine, and if it doesn't, it's having that clutch, belt, and drum pick up from 0 RPMs to 800 right now. When you slowly put that handle in, you bump it in, you're allowing it to press, pick up some speed behind it, get some inertia. Once it's matched at 800 RPMs, that's when you put that handle down, you throttle up so everything runs together at 2200 RPMs, and then start your chipping process. If you're ever engaging this clutch, you smell something burning, you hear something slapping, you hear squealing, you see smoke coming out of there, please stop the machine immediately and find out what's going on. Anytime we're transporting this machine, guys, especially after chipping, we want to have this clutch in gear. There's a few reasons for that, but when we lock out our feed system here in a minute, what you guys are going to see is behind our feed wheels, in between the drum, you have about a 6 to 8 inch dead space between those two systems. A lot of times what's going to happen, especially on logs or branches, that wood's going to get fed through to those feed wheels. Once that wood is off of those feed wheels, if that drum doesn't pull it all the way in, you may have a little piece of wood that's sitting behind that drum about this big. And what happens when you're running this machine down the road with this clutch disengaged, that drum stopped, that wood is going to slowly vibrate. It's going to fall underneath that drum. When you go to engage your clutch the next time, that knife is going to come around and it's going to jam itself on that little piece of wood. A lot of times when that happens, guys try to force it in. They try revving it up and dropping that clutch in gear. You just bought yourself a new clutch. Just to give you an idea, this clutch pack is about $1,500 and they're back ordered like a pain in the butt right now. So please, our goal is to not replace this clutch pack. Going back, transporting the machine with the clutch in gear, guys, kind of the same idea. Let's say right now, brand new, no wood has gone through. What could happen theoretically, especially going over steep terrain, a lot of hills on it, is as you're going, these plates are going to slowly start to vibrate together. It's not going to engage, but those plates are slowly touching. You're going to warp it from getting those plates hot. You go to engage it, those plates are stuck together. It's not going to engage. So anytime we're moving it, just drop that clutch in gear, guys. You won't have any problems. When you're done, please make sure you take that clutch out of gear. If you read the manual, follow proper safety techniques, allow that drum to come to a complete stop before you shut the machine off. That way no one climbs in there while the machine's still spinning. The beauty of this is a non-adjustable spring-loaded clutch per NACD on this plaque here. We have seen guys over-greasing on this clutch pack. We can't stress it enough. On this bottom bullet point on this pack, it's 1 shot of grease every 100 hours. So it's broken down. You're going to have a few daily points that we're going to touch on as we go around the machine. A lot of new operators see these grease points. They think, hey, I need to hit these daily. You pack too much grease in here, you will over-grease this clutch. You will be buying a new clutch. So just make sure you hit it. It's 1 shot every 100 hours. You're simply just lubricating this arm for that tension or that motion there, so it goes with it. Do you guys have any questions on the clutch or how that's working? Speak now or forever hold your peace. No, as soon as we leave, warranty's over. No, all right, perfect, guys. So let's go ahead. We'll jump to the belt. Again, we kind of touched on it. Your belt is what is actually transferring the power from your 120 horse engine to that drum. If this belt is out of adjustment, you're not getting your proper horsepower to that drum. You're going to increase your clogging chances. The machine's really just not going to perform like it needs to. So as long as you guys know, by the time we take off out of here, this is a brand new piece of rubber. It is going to need to be adjusted. Bandit's sticker here is going to say after the first 2 hours to check the adjustment on that belt. Follow this sticker. 10 to 20 hours, guys, is really when you're going to see that belt start to stretch. Now, if you take this out, you're hogging 12-inch logs through it right away. Check it after first 2 hours. Well, check it either way for the video. But realistically, guys, when that bigger wood starts to go through, that's when that belt's going to start to stretch. We're going to supply you with this tool here. It's a two-sided tool, so you have belt tension check on this side and then an anvil setting up here, which we'll get to later. This tool simply going to go into this hole here on this belt guard to get a feel for how tight that belt is. This is nothing more than a shiny sales object, guys, but it is a useful tool for a quick guided check to really follow manufacturer inspections. It's broken down in this manual, but they want you to take this belt guard off, actually get a feel for that belt, make sure there's no debris build up on the inside of that. A lot of times, guys, a little chip falls in here, picks up into one of the grooves on the belt. Guys don't check it right away. It gets caught on that groove and it wears that belt and pulley down. You're just buying yourself new maintenance parts at that point. So about once a week, guys, just pop this cover off. They're all 9/16 bolts just to get a quick little inspection on that belt, make sure everything's good to go. So per Bandit's manual, for 40 pounds of downforce on this tool, they want about a 1/2 inch deflection. I'm not the biggest fan of that recommendation because your 40 pounds of elbow torque is different from mine, different from yours, and so on. So, you know, I may walk by, I may say, hey, this belt's nice and tight. You may walk by and say, hey, this belt is loose, and now we're sitting here arguing with each other about it. My recommendation before you take this machine out and start chipping, everyone just take this tool, put it in that hole, get a feel for how tight that belt is. It's how tight that belt should be. If it's any looser than that, again, just do your adjustment. Real simple. If you come up, you feel that belt is loose and it needs to be adjusted. Your engine sits on 4 mounting bolts. You've got a 15/16 bolt here, 15/16 bolt here. And if you guys look on the back side here, you guys want to step up and just take a peek. You've got a bolt here and then a bolt here. That's simply locking your engine down. So you want to break all 4 of those bolts loose about 2 to 3 turns. You don't want to take them all the way out. They are threaded into little plates. If they come out, it's a little difficult to get back in. Don't ask me how I know that. So break those bolts loose, guys. You have 2 adjuster bolts up here. You're going to break this inside bolt loose, inside nut, excuse me. Walk you back towards the machine. You're going to tighten these nuts down. That's simply going to pull this engine, pull that clutch, and tighten that belt. Real simple process. Should take you 10-15 minutes once you know what you're doing. Easiest way, guys, again, if you follow the manual, measure your distance between the two. A lot of times what we see, a common mistake for new operators doing that maintenance, is you do 10 turns on this side of the engine, you do 5 turns over here. You now got that engine cocked a little bit. When you go, you drop this clutch in, your pulley's off just a hair, it shreds that belt right up. So you need to make sure, if you got the time, you got the patience, count your actual turns. Easiest way, draw Sharpie on that nut so you know where you started. Do 10 turns here, 10 turns here, tighten it, and then so on and so forth if it needs to keep going. Realistically, guys, you're only going to need to do that about 3 to 4 times before that belt is fully stretched out and at its proper adjustment. At that point, if it stretches from there, it's just buying a new belt. Which you will have to do eventually, but it shouldn't be for quite some time. When you're done with that, guys, make sure on your engine mounting bolts, your 4 bolts, your 2 back there, 2 up here, torque those down to 180 foot-pounds. If those aren't torqued enough, you hog a big log through, it's going to pull that engine back, get everything out of adjustment again, and do damage on your drum. Any questions on how to adjust that belt? Yes, sir.
So once it's to its total adjusted length and then you use it and then it's worn out, when you replace the belt with a new one, do you need to back everything out and scoot everything back to where it originally was?
Exactly. Yes, sir. Yep.
Thank you.
To put it on, it's real easy to do. When you get to that point, you'll probably even forget I said this, guys, but essentially just put a groove on the end of the pulley, simply walk it on with your hands. Be extremely cautious, wear gloves when you do that. We've seen guys get their fingers caught in that pulley and belt before. it's never a fun time because your finger's not going to win that battle. So just walk it onto that pulley, nice and easy, and then once it's fully onto those grooves, pull that engine back over, tighten it, and go from there. So great question. Any questions on the belts, guys? Perfect. Moving on to the discharge, guys, you are completely hydraulic. Again, it's on the remote. You do have a transport locking pin here. When that pin is locked up, it's just going to prevent that chute from moving. The idea is when you're towing it down the road on the trailer, it's going to lock that up so that discharge doesn't spin around on you. You've got a hydraulic motor, so that's not going to happen, but that's what that pin is for, just so you guys are aware. You do have a height adjustable discharge chute, so you raise this jack up. That's going to move this whole portion of the chute, and then you got the flipper on the end. You've got 2 clean out portions on this discharge chute, guys, if this ever clogs up on you. If you raise this jack all the way up in the air, you pull this rubber part down, that's going to allow you to hit this end. You've got 2 9/16 nuts right here. You take those nuts off, this door kicks down, that's going to allow you to get this part of the transition. Not going to lie to you guys, your limits on this 12XP track is going to be about this toolbox to the same side of the track on the other side. If you try and blow your discharge this way, which first off you never should because now you're pointing it back at the crew, but if you ever try and go past that toolbox, you're going to increase your chances of clogging up that discharge. Reason being, if you guys, again, clear plexiglass looking in, your drum is cutting the wood right here. It's now having to bring that wood up your discharge and then make a sharp 90-degree turn out. Right now, with the machine being brand new, we could do that. But as soon as something is out of adjustment, not getting that proper torque on it, it's going to sit right in that elbow right there and clog up and just be a pain in the butt. So keep it forward as often as possible. Obviously, when you're doing that, guys, you always want to keep an eye on what you're actually discharging at. If there's any cars, houses, whatever it may be, just keep an eye on where you're blowing those chips to. Any questions on the discharge chute, guys? Perfect.
Sorry, I couldn't hear.
Operator's manual in this black cover. I know we've referred to it a couple of times. Track undercarriage, guys. I'm assuming you guys have other track machines in your fleet, so you're familiar with how that's going to work. You have a grease point right here. For video purposes, follow Cat's manual that came with the original books for the machine. The way Caterpillar wants these tracks measured to see if they're tight or not, they want you to lift this machine off the ground with 2 floor jacks, measure the slack on the rubber of that track. Obviously, that's not going to happen. If you ask me to do that, I'd say I don't know what you're talking about. Simply, guys, just get a feel for this track. It should be tight. If you see it binding up when you're turning, you see a lot of slack in it, stop. The last thing we want to happen is kick a track off because that's just a bad day for everybody. If you come over here, you can physically lift this track up, you could kick it and it flexes. Just get a grease gun, guys, shoot some grease in there. I do recommend you use a hand pump for that. It is a sealed grease point in there. We've seen guys use battery guns to where it's just going to continuously pump. You're going to blow those seals and now you're buying a new seal for that bottom track part. A manual pump, when you reach your maximum, you aren't physically going to be able to run that pump anymore. If this track comes off, the way I'm going to quickly go over it. Please trust me, it's not this quick out in the field. There's a nut on that grease point. You're going to walk it.
Hold on.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Sorry.
Before we go
Sorry
that
to
far.
interrupt you.
Yeah, no.
Is the grease setting the tension on the track?
Yep. Yep, so when you're putting grease in there, guys, it's pumping grease into a cylinder. It's pushing a cylinder, which is pushing this wheel forward, tightening that track out. Yep, so that's why.
So if you notice that the track is loose, maybe it needs grease?
Exactly.
Or,
Yep. Yep, that's how you would adjust it. You'd pump grease in there. That's going to expand that cylinder out. Yes, sir. And actually, that's the perfect way to describe how to get that track back on. If this track kicks off, you're not going to get that track onto a fully expanded cylinder. I have a feeling he's done it before. What you want to do, guys, is that grease nipple where you're actually shooting the grease. I want to say it's a 3/8 nut in there. You're going to back that grease point off. It's going to be a mess, so wear gloves. All that grease is going to shoot back out at you. It's going to come out this way. Find something to lightly tap that cylinder to get all that grease out for easiest operation back on. Take that rubber track, Crowbars work best. Get that track back over that cylinder, rethread your nipple back in, pump the grease back tight again. Your track's now back up and running. If you do it that quick, please call me. You're a magician. Any questions on that track, guys? Perfect. These are independent tracks, so just because you're greasing that track, you're not greasing that track. So you need to make sure you're hitting both, checking both. Avoid turning on rocks, stumps, anything like that. That's going to put a tension up in that track. You always want to turn on flat ground when possible. So let's go ahead. Let's open up our drum housing. I'm going to jump on the back side of this machine. If you guys want to climb up here, and we'll go over our knives and drum maintenance. So little gold key is going to open little gold lock up here, guys. Just friendly advice, when you put this lock back on, make sure you go underneath. If you go down doing it that way, you're not going to fit the key back in. You'll be cutting the lock off. Again, don't ask me how I know that. Hood pin switch up here, guys. I referred to this when we were going over that control panel. If this is plugged in right now, and right now, if we turn the key on, nothing's going to turn on. It's going to be completely dead. If the key was on and I unplugged it while it's on, you're going to have a symbol pop up. It's an X with a half circle. This is simply just a trailer cord connecting that circuit, telling that computer that this door is closed at all times. As soon as that comes out, it's telling that engine this housing is now open. We can reach in and grab that knife. If the machine ever shuts off on you in the middle of operation, this is the first thing we want you to check. Chances are this just vibrated out loose. I would just say about once a year, just plan on replacing this harness. As this machine gets a lot of vibration on it, that connection is going to weaken up. If you could give me a pull on that, I need to. Guys, as you see, it takes you 5 seconds to check these knives. Please follow Bandit's recommendation. Do it daily. You could actually, you wouldn't mind, since he's got gloves on, guys, I'm gonna ask him to spin this drum around just to give us an idea of what you're looking at. You have
put that phone right on there.
4 double-edged blades on this drum. It's a 24-inch diameter drum. All knives have 2 working sides. We'll leave it here. Follow Bandit's maintenance book on this, guys. Please check these knives every day. As you guys know, on these chippers, you can ruin a set of knives in 5 minutes. You could ruin them in 50 hours. It 100% depends on what you're feeding through it. If you're sending a lot of foreign debris, a lot of rock, a lot of dirt through it, you're going to toast those knives really quick. If it's 100% clean wood, I'd say realistically 20 to 30 hours before you're flipping those blades around. So the way to adjust those blades, again, is going to take you 15 minutes. Said by the salesman, don't ask the mechanics that. Your locking pin here is going to slide into that hole there. It's going to lock that drum into place. You have 4 15/16 bolts. You're going to air gun those out. Take that knife off. Again, guys, we're doing this with all PPE, glasses, earmuffs, and gloves on. Pick that knife up. You're going to want to clean the backside of that knife off. If you have access to an air gun, blow those threads out just so there's no debris buildup inside of those threads. You're going to flip that blade around, put those bolts back in. When you put those bolts back in, guys, there's a sticker here, page in the manual. I'd write it up here. If you're responsible for this, I'd get it tattooed on your wrist so you don't forget this number. 180 foot-pounds those need to be torqued down to. If you over-torque those knives or you under-torque them, as soon as wood hits those, it's going to grenade, and I can't tell you where that metal is going to go. Unfortunately, there has been operators killed from knives coming off, coming right at you. There's nothing really you could do at that point. In a perfect scenario, it's going to discharge out and go into your chip pile, but it's not always a perfect scenario. So please make sure those are torqued down to 180 foot-pounds. Every other knife flip, we're going to want you to replace the hardware on those bolts and washers. You can resharpen these knives. We do it at our Sacramento location, so you could send them down to us. Obviously, we have all of our specs on it. if you decide to outsource it and go to a local saw shop up here. I'm not familiar with anyone up here that has a knife sharpener, but if you guys are, there's a page in the manual that has all of our dimensions on it. Please give that to them when you drop those knives off. Reason we say that is because Vermeer, Morbark, and Bandit are all sharpened at a different degree. If you sharpen these at another manufacturer's spec, you just ruin those knives. And set of knives now is $350, resharpens $80. So you guys do the math. It adds up quick when you're throwing knives away like that. Any questions on your knife? Yes,
so
sir.
that little tension bar that we used for the drum before.
Yep.
When you're putting these knives back on, that little bar has a little gauge on that. So how would you use that when you're tightening these back on?
So it's not going to be necessarily when you're tightening these. It's going to be your anvil, your bed knife on the bottom. Yep. Okay. So what I'll do here in a minute when we close this, we're going to lock this feed system up, and then I'll show you how to do that. But kind of getting ahead of ourselves here, guys. But what he asked was that tool with the belt tension on it, that other side for your anvil setting. Anytime these are resharpened, if you guys have ever seen that anvil on the bottom, if you imagine a pair of scissors, your anvil is what the wood is actually being cut off of. Your knife is doing the cutting. The anvil is what it's coming off of. If you resharpen that knife, you just open that gap up between the two, you know, an 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch, whatever it may be, to where that anvil is going to need to be adjusted tighter to that knife to close that gap up to get you a cleaner product coming out. Same thing, if you do that on a resharpen and then you put brand new knives back on, you need to make sure to walk that anvil back off. You'll know it right away because you won't even be able to turn the drum at that point. But it's when you don't, and then that knife kisses that anvil at 2,200 RPMs. And again, there's no telling you.
Talk about spinning that thing manually after you're done to make sure that.
Yeah, just a quick check for that, guys. When you're done putting these knives on, just spin it around. Make sure there's nothing touching, nothing out of order, no tightness on that drum. These drums are balanced. They do it back in Michigan where they build these machines. It's a thing of beauty, guys, how they balance these drums. So if there's something out of balance to where you spin this drum and you see it stopping at one point, stop. Don't run the machine. Call us at that point because something's out of whack there. Any questions on the knives? Perfect. Coming here where you're standing, you could see it here. We have a block here, guys, that runs over here. We do have it's called the rope shear device. So you could see it. There's a secondary knife up here. You could see it run across the drum housing. So the idea behind that, guys, is let's say this drum is spinning. I'm going to go in reverse here. And mishap happens. Rope gets sucked up into this drum. Your knife is going to pick that rope up. The idea behind the rope shear device is this drum is making its revolution with that rope on the edge of the knife. As it passes that counter blade, it's going to shear that rope off and prevent it from wrapping. 50-50 shot, that actually works. Not going to lie to you guys, I'll say it with the video running, that is nothing more than a shiny sales device. Please, please, please do not rely your life on that machine. I don't think you guys are doing climbing in the trees. If you are, golden rule for these machines, if you have 100 feet of rope up in the tree, your machine's 200 feet away. That way you physically cannot feed someone through this machine. It happens way too often to where a brand new guy on the crew, dragging brush, that rope gets picked up in the brush, sends it through. That climber either gets choked out in the tree or it's pulled out of the tree into the machine. Either way, that guy's dead. Have you guys seen the video we did a few years back of the dummy going through the machine? No. All right, I'll pass that.
Not on video.
Yeah. Hopefully you only see it on video. So this, guys, we did this before this rope shear was out. So the machine I'm going to show you did not have this device on it. We tied a 200-pound dummy onto about 100 feet of rope and sent it through a 15-inch machine to show you what will happen in that situation. This is on YouTube. It's just dummy goes through wood chipper. We show this on every training so you guys can see. It's not necessarily climber's line, it's whatever it may be. So if you guys want to watch that, pass it around. Please don't go through my photos. It's private stuff.
Holy hell. Oh, wow. Oh.
So you could restart it from there. The rest of it's just him walking around, but it shows you guys it's
Quick.
it's instantaneous.
Yeah, well, pretty much. Like, it's
So to recap, Hunter, that's the most common cause of no start.
Yep.
Correct.
That little plug, if something's out or someone forgets to plug that in after changing knives, the machine's not going to start. That's the first thing we would like you to check before.
There's no locking pin for this.
No, nothing locking it in. There's a little latch holding it back, but nothing major. Yeah, so guys, that just shows you what's going to happen. I've heard it on trainings before we show that video to where guys say, well, I'll run up and I'll hit the control bar before that happens. That ain't happening. That dragging that you see is the brush being pulled through. Your dummy from there to here and like that is the actual rope hitting that drum. Now the reason, guys, I say that rope shear device is a shiny cells object, if you think about it, you have 4 knives on this drum. So let's say this knife up here has the rope picked up on it and is being sheared up here. Well, your 2 knives down here already picked that rope back up. It's still going to chip the rope up. All that's doing is it's chipping your rope into about 2 to 3 foot sections to where it's going to prevent the drum from wrapping that rope around the shaft. Really, it's saving the machine. It's not saving your life on the end of the machine. You're still going to get sucked in. So please do not rely your life on that rope shear device. Do you guys have any questions on the drum, knife maintenance, or that rope shear device? Perfect. If you guys didn't see, we just locked that up to go move on. So coming back, guys, here, this is going to bring us to our first greasing point. This is just running a hose back to that main drum bearing. This sticker up here indicates it. This is not a daily grease point. This is a sealed bearing on that drum bearing. Once a month, it's 8 pumps of grease. So you have one here, one on the back side, behind those fuel tanks, which I'll mention again just so we remember it. Once a month, 8 pumps of grease. Please do not over grease that. They are going to recommend annually clean out. That's going to be in the manual for how often that is. You're going to want to take that bearing off, get that grease out, repack that bearing full of new grease just to clear that system out. From here, guys, we have our yoke lock bar. So our feed system here, guys, I know I asked this in the beginning. How many of you guys have ran a Bandit before? Perfect. Okay, so majority of us. So the whole thing that sets Bandit apart from our competition, guys, is this slide box here. We have a vertical slide box with the hydraulic lift cylinder here. The other 2 big manufacturers have a pivot system to where it's going to pivot one feed wheel off of an arm back. This is bringing our feed system straight up and down. You have 2,000 pounds of down pressure on that lift cylinder right there. So you should never have feeding problems with this machine. Now, the reason I'm explaining that, when you lift this system all the way up to where it's sitting here, that hole is now going to be sitting here. This pin is going to slide through there, lock that system out, which I'm going to do here in a second so we can go over that anvil. We do have easy climb yoke springs here. You have one here, one on the back side over there. Again, guys, just being honest with you, this is kind of one of those shiny cells objects again. The idea behind that is as this slide box moves up, that spring is pulling back down, creating more pulling power onto that feed system. With this lift cylinder and that extra hydraulic power, you'll never even notice that those springs are there. If you want to mess with it, if you want to increase that tension, just pull that cotter pin, pull that pin. You've got 3 higher positions where it's going to increase your tension down on that spring if you would like that. If you're ever going to leave this up for an extended period of time, pull that pin out, let those springs free float so they don't stretch those springs out while it's up. That'd be, overnight, longer than what we're going to do here in that scenario. You do have 2 grease points, guys. These are daily grease points. Every 8 hours, 10 shots of grease. So you're going to have about 6 daily grease points. Your tracks, we're going to say as needed. So you're going to have 2 here. You're going to have 2 identical on the backside, and then 2 up on the top of the winch, which I'll touch on again. Those are just a couple shots every day just to lubricate those bearings up top. Valve box here, guys, I know I keep referring to it. This is that 3rd control function that I was talking about. This is where all your hydraulics are actually running. So in that scenario, we'd be taking this cover off and moving the valves. I'm not even going to get into that for safety reasons. You do have 2 level gauges here, guys. Please follow these. If that bubble moves into the yellow, don't run the machine on that terrain. Keep it in the white at all times. you are going to have shutdowns on the engine to where if all that oil moves, it's going to shut the machine down. But follow those for your side hills and straight up and down. Let's go ahead, we'll lock that up, guys, and then we'll go over our winch controls here in a second.
Those shutdowns, that's for operation. What about if we're moving it from place to place? You know, I'm not saying like we're going to go vertical, but if you get in a situation where it does go in yellow, is it going to shut the whole machine off?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the machine won't know the difference between, you know, just moving it. So either way, it'll shut it down.
Before you get started on that, if it goes into the machine down there, when you start it back up to get it out of the yellow, then so it doesn't give you.
Correct. It'll move. I'll have to check with the cat. There is a setting in there to where if it's in it for too long, it'll throw a coat. And then it may just pop a coat up on you when you go to reset it.
Like if you're loading it on the trailer,
no, it won't be like that. If it's like, you know, quick loading it up or something like that. But even this, if you follow it to that 25-degree max, you know, it's pretty steep. I've seen these things taken in some sketchy areas.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's way steeper than you think.
Well, I've seen it where it's pattern another food before, and I didn't know if that was
Yeah. Well, the pickup for the oil isn't there, so that's what happens. It starts to run dry.
And that's what I was wondering, if the oil does go low and then that throws off that sensor with the low oil in the machine.
I mean, you'll know it. I mean, in other words, if you're going to come across the side hill, maybe not start to think
So
about
guys,
a different
anytime
path
we're going to be
and
climbing
go back
in here,
over some ways
checking
like
out our
that.
feed system.
That's all it is.
Keys in hand, remote off, hood pin unplugged, box closed. That way, if someone's upset with you at the day, they don't fire it up and send you through. We're going to keep the remote here. If you guys didn't see that, all we did was open our feed system up, slide that pin through, lock that system out. So now we could go ahead, talk about the backside, the actual feeding techniques, and our winch controls. So I'm gonna start up here on the winch, guys. Kind of going back to that rope shear device and that hood pin. This is set up now for all OSHA safety standards on winch controls. What I mean by that, actually it happened right back here in our backyard a couple years back. There was an operator killed by the winch being sucked through the machine. We now have safety systems set up on this winch to where you cannot feed and winch at the same time. So I'm going to explain to you how that works. Essentially, you have an engage and disengage here on your winch controls. So up is engage, disengage, you drop it down. Engage, that pin is into the spool, everything is running through the remote, you're hydraulic driven. When we go down to disengage, you're pulling that pin out, you're running everything out by hand, to where you're running that rope to the log, tying it up. At that point, you set it back to engage and pull your rope in. Now, if you guys watch, when I flip this down to disengage, this rope is gonna lose tension, and there's a system in here, this is gonna kick out a couple of inches. So when that comes out, there's a rubber boot up top that's being pushed when this is all the way in. As soon as that rubber boot loses tension, your light up top is gonna come on, your feed system's gonna stop. Also, the machine's not gonna be able to be driven. So if you ever go, like right now, if I started the machine up and tried to drive it, the machine's not gonna run. So if that ever happens to you, before you call us, please check that winch light, make sure that is all the way back. Just saves everyone time. It's all the way sucked in before you try and move it. So going back to our feeding techniques, guys, as I mentioned, as soon as that is out, your feed system stops running. What we want you to do, again, because we don't want you feeding and winching at the same time, let's say you have your log here that you physically cannot lift up. You need the winch to pull it up to the feed system. You have your rope tied up. At this point, I'm gonna flip back to engage. I'm gonna run it back to our hydraulics. Your operator on the remote is gonna suck your rope in. As this rope sucks in, your end of the log is gonna sit here. He's gonna drop that log here by sending that rope back out. You, the groundsman, whoever it may be, undo your rope, tie it to the back of the log. When you pull that rope back in, your end of the log is now gonna go up against those feed wheels. When that log is up against those feed wheels, if you hit feed forward, it's gonna allow your feed system to spin for 1 second. So what it's going to do in that 1 second, now you can continuously bump it to where your feed system just slowly turns. It's slowly going to get a bite on that log. It's going to get the log in its grips. As soon as that log is sitting in those feed wheels, undo your rope from the back of the log, take this, put it back here. As soon as the operator pulls this rope in, this is pushed down, he hits feed forward, it's going to send that log through the machine. I know it's a little tough to understand that just explaining it, but you guys kind of get the gist of it, how that's running?
Safety device.
Yes, sir. Yep. Please do not try and bypass that, guys. It is there for a reason. If you bypass that, there's an injury on this machine. Good luck to you. OSHA's going to have a field day with you. So please do not tamper with any of that up there. Just remember, engage, disengage. If that light is on up top, that sensor is not being pushed. You do have about 13,000 pound pulling capacity on this winch. This rope is rated for 5,000 pounds, so this rope is going to snap before your winch gets damaged. You guys have any questions on the winch, how that system is working? Please do not use that winch for recovery. In that scenario, get another machine to pull the machine out of whatever situation you got it in. Don't use this to pull logs over, to pull trees down. It's just not smart, guys. It's not what this is designed.
How much does that machine weigh, Hunter?
You're going to be, with the 120 horse cat, you're going to be about 9,000 pounds. I know I said earlier I thought it was a smaller engine, so about 9,000 pounds on this one. Perfect, guys. No questions on that winch? Alrighty. Going over our control systems and our feeding techniques, guys. So we have a control bar here, and we've got a hydraulic bump bar down here. These two systems are going to override our remote 100% of the time. This is a control bar going directly into that valve. We pull out to feed, push into reverse. There is a neutral right in the middle, right about there, to where your feed system's not going to spin at all. And then a hydraulic bump bar down here. If you guys are familiar with this, not the greatest design, but for safety, that's the way the state went. If this is bumped while you're feeding, it's going to kick your feed system into reverse. You have to come over here, lift that handle up, kick it back into feed mode. If you guys find yourself being pulled in, the beauty of this is your knees are going to hit that, but if for somehow you manage to jump over this and you're being pulled in, guys, pull these last chance cables. That's going to kick that bar into reverse. We call those the no hope ropes. If you have to rely on those, you have no hope. You're already pulled through the machine. Please do not put yourself in that scenario. Please do not stand on the infeed to kick material in. You guys think it's a joke. Unfortunately, there's been people killed doing that. Grab your foot. Bandit is going to supply you with this tool here. Please use this wooden pusher paddle to push that smaller material in. You should never be reaching past these last chance cables. Completely made of wood, guys. When those feed wheels grab it, let it go. Do not fight the machine. If you do, I can tell you exactly what's going to happen. It's going to kick up. You're going to break your knuckles. It's going to kick down. You're going to break your knuckles. When it grabs it, let it go. You're going to be very tempted to put a rake, shovel, pitchfork back in this holder. Please, please, please do not do that. This is designed for this wooden tool here. We're happy to sell you another one down at Cowline. Branches work wonders, guys. Just use a branch to push that material in. Never rely on yourself to push that material in. With that being said, guys, firewood sized pieces, as you guys know, are not ideal for these machines. You want to leave them in about 3 to 4 foot pieces for multiple reasons. One, for your ease of operation of sending that wood through. Two, you guys could see that dead space we were talking about earlier between the feeding system. A lot of times what happens with firewood sized pieces, you throw it in, it hits that feed wheel, it bounces back to where you're now tempted to reach here and kick that material in. Obviously, you're putting yourself in harm's way doing that. If that happens and that wood is sitting there, let the next guy with his load push that material in with his bite of the material. With that being said, guys, proper feeding techniques. You guys all know how to feed a chipper. You have your brush here. You're going to feed butt end first. Once that feed system has it in its grip, you're going to get out of the way, loop around, go get your next bite. You do not need to stand here and watch the machine. I can promise you it's going to chip the wood. It's going to do its job. When you're standing here, you're not only putting yourself in harm's way, you're putting the guy behind you in harm's way. This machine does not know the difference between a log and your body. Please don't put yourself in that situation. We do have a welded in feed tray, guys, so Bigger wood, it's going to last longer on this material. If you're feeding it with machines or skid steers, whatever the case may be, it's going to hold up a little bit better. Just extra heavy duty on that feed system. Do you guys have any questions on how to feed this chipper?
No, but I had a question. How likely is it that, let's say I put in a tree, that the branches are gonna hit that bump?
Very likely.
Yeah.
Very likely. Yep.
You'll adjust, Hobby. You'll adjust. It's just a matter of picking it up a little bit higher.
It's not my spec either, but stay right to that way.
Told me
Yeah.
what it does. I'm like, really?
If you know the chipper manufacturers, Vermeer runs that standard. Bandit doesn't, but state spec. So yeah, one of those things. Any other questions, guys, on how to feed the machine? Perfect. With keys back here, remote with us, guys, we're gonna go over that anvil check. Just gonna get this rope out of the way for a second. So if you guys kind of want to take a step in, we'll go over that anvil adjustment. Again, going back to our pair of scissors, guys, that anvil is what the wood is actually being cut off of. The tighter that gap is, obviously, without touching, the cleaner the chip is going to be. So what you're going to want to do is put that tool on the edge of that anvil like that, and your clearance should just be clearing that anvil. If it's tighter than that, you're just going to, again, get a smaller chip out of it. If it's wider, you're just putting more wear and tear on the drum than it needs. I'll climb out of the way so you guys can see what I'm talking about. You can see how that knife is just clearing that anvil. Sorry about that. You guys get the gist of it?
Yeah.
Are the blades, not only are they reversible, but can you flip them also, or are they one-sided?
They're two-sided. So you got this side, and then you could flip it around. And use the back side.
Oh, I meant.
Oh, no, yeah. Sorry, yes, thank you. So yeah, it's just the two edges. Now your anvil is four-edged.
Okay.
So your anvil has this side. Now I say that with an asterisk. If you say on top of your maintenance it's four-sided, if you let your anvil round over like this, it's two-sided. The reason I say that, if this rounds over to where it eats into the backside of that anvil, it's two-sided. So right now you have this side, you could flip it here, flip it upside down, and then flip it back around. If I was double jointed, I could really show you. Your anvil, guys, is going to work the same way as your engine adjustment works to adjust your belts. So you've got 5 bolts there. You could see the bottom of the threads just at the top of the anvil. They're not actually coming out. They're sitting flush with it. If you guys really would like, we could crawl underneath the machine and go over it. But essentially, your 2 outside bolts have those adjuster bolts on them, 15/16. You're going to break all 5 loose. You don't want to take them all the way out. Then you use your 2 adjuster bolts to pull that anvil closer to the knife or farther away from the knife. If anyone wants, we could get under the machine. I could actually show you what I'm referring to, but it's the same as the engine. Or I'll guide you so I don't get dirty. You guys do. Again, guys, when you're done doing that adjustment, 180 foot-pounds. That's the magic number on this machine. Make sure those are torqued. Just like the knives, that needs to be torqued exactly to that spec. If that anvil moves over while you're chipping, you guys finish the story. Machine's grenading. It's really, unless you have a lot of patience, it's a two-person job to actually do that adjustment. One guy up here with that tool checking your clearance, one guy underneath the machine moving it. This is the reason, guys, that you need to keep those knives in sets of 4. You can't mix and match sets of knives because if you do that, and let's say these knives were sent down to resharpen and one knife gets too big of a chunk in it to take out and you put a brand new knife on it, well, now everything's out of adjustment to where one knife is going to be kissing that anvil, your other 3 knives are clear. So you need to keep those knives in sets of 4 at all times. So again, don't mix and match knives. On that knife, since that's running through my mind, guys, please do not use a die grinder to try and resurface those knives. We've seen it done before. You just bought yourself new knives, so don't do that. Bandit does sell a little tool. It's a resharpen tool. We take them home and use them for our kitchen knives because that's really about what they're good for. So unless they're brand new like this to where there's still a real sharp edge on it, it's a useless tool. A lot of guys think they can let their knives get rounded over like this and then use that little tool to resharpen their knife. Obviously, guys, that knife right now, if we ran our hand across it, it'd slice our hand open. If you can run your hand along a knife, your knife is shot. You need to flip it right away. So, I've gone out, we've gotten calls where machines have 2 hours on it and guys are saying, I want my money back. This machine's not performing like it should be. first question we ask, are your knives good? Yes. We get out there, we could do this on the knife. That's not a good knife. It's trying to cut wood. As soon as you let dull knives on this machine, you just turn this chipper to a chunker to where it's just hammering that wood. You're putting a lot of stress on this machine and those knife bolts. So, do you guys have any questions on the feeding techniques, guys? Anvil adjustments while we got it open? Perfect. I'm gonna go ahead and pull that tool out. So we could go ahead, we'll wrap about around back here, guys. We're just about done. I appreciate your patience and ears. One of the things too, guys, that sets Bandit apart, we've got this bottom trap door here. So if you open that up, is this chip with this? Oh yeah, I do. Someone's lying. No, I'm kidding. Your bottom trap door, guys, when you open that door up, right now, if we crawl underneath, you could reach up and grab that bottom feed wheel. So the idea behind that is with that door open, as we're chipping any smaller twigs or branches or rocks or dirt, as they go through that feed system, it's going to allow it one last escape to fall back onto the ground rather than go through and damage your knives. A lot of guys run that door closed, entirely up to you. You're just allowing everything to go through the machine. Being a track chipper out in the woods, I would leave that open 100% of the time. All it's going to do, the complaint with it, is it leaves what we call a little snail trail with the machine, to where it's going to leave a little pile of debris when you're done chipping. In the woods, that doesn't matter, but saving the money on the knives does. So just leave it open. Make sure you close it at the end of the day. Don't reach your hands and feet up in there to grab that feed wheel. Or do. Common sense is a hard thing to come by now. Hydraulic tank here, guys. Diesel tank here. Excuse me, before I get ahead of myself. Your 2 daily grease points here. These stickers are indicating. You've got one on this bottom feed wheel, one on this top feed wheel. Again, 8 hours, 10 shots of grease. Diesel here, hydraulic oil here. Please know the difference between the tanks. Hydraulic is going to have a little sight glass here. Diesel is going to have a big nice sticker right here. Trying to keep it simple. There is a lock here. I do recommend locking your hydraulic oil and keeping your diesel open, or vice versa. You guys all seem like great guys except you, man. I'm a little worried about you putting oil in the diesel, but I'm messing. Guys, just make sure you're keeping those separate. Pain in the butt when that happens. Sight gauge up here for your diesel level on that tank. You have a pressure indicator. If that filter gets clogged up, it's going to go into yellow. Then it's going to go into red to indicate that filter inside needs to be changed. It is an inline high pressure filter, so it's not, if you're used to our smaller machines, your filter would sit off to the side. This one's actually up in there. Sight glass, 3/4 to 1/4 full at all times, guys. You do want to allow room in this tank for expansion of that oil. Also, if you fill it up to the top, you hit a slope, your oil is going to come pouring over the top. It just makes a mess for everyone. Our most commonly failed bearing is this back drum bearing here, because you can't physically see it. You guys forget it's back there. Please do not forget to hit that bearing. Again, that's the one that is once a month, 8 pumps of grease. It's a sealed bearing back there. Last but not least, guys, we're going to touch on this radiator and DEF tank. How many of you are familiar with DEF at this point? Perfect. Should be everyone. It's a real simple process, guys, but it's very easy to mess up as well. This is a 5-gallon diesel exhaust fluid tank. If you're not familiar with it, it's Tier 4 final. It's the beauty of California and the state we're in. This machine requires DEF in this tank. Easiest way I tell guys, O'Reilly's or Napa sells 2.5-gallon boxes of DEF. It's a 5-gallon tank. When you hit 50% on your screen, go get a box, fill it up, you're back to 100%. I did see, I don't know why it left like that, but it's reading at 38%, so it does need some, or I'd recommend you throw some DEF in it before you take it out. There are low sensors on it, again, like that oil, to where if that DEF gets low, like your truck, it's gonna warn you, then it's gonna shut you down. Please protect this tank, guys. Don't drop any debris on it. That cap is $500 alone. Please be extremely cautious of that system.
Hunter,
Yes, sir.
I want to touch that. If you open up one of those jugs, you need to put all of it in, and if it doesn't take all of it, get rid of it. Don't store DEF once you open it. Never put a half-used DEF jug in that tank, ever, because it'll end up crystallizing and then go into the sensors, and it'll be it'll be a huge problem down at the Caterpillar dealer.
Yeah, that's a huge point. You just kissed warranty goodbye at that point.
Does it
Yeah.
just react once you open up the bottle?
Yeah,
As
it
soon
starts
as
to
that
crystallize.
oxygen hits that fluid,
So it's
I'm
open,
not a chemist,
in,
but it
or
starts
in
to
the
crystallize.
garbage, and never leave a depth tank for whatever rig you use around here. Never leave a depth tank half. If you see something like that, never pick it up and put it in your vehicle or this or anything.
Put it into a
They're
truck,
awful.
another def tank right away.
Yeah.
Is there another caution with crystallizing? Like, what if this thing's sitting for 6 months? Is there something we have to do?
It's an insulated tank in there, so you'll be good.
Yeah, we haven't seen it like that. As long as you're not open, if that cap's open, yes. But as long as that cap's closed, and generally the whole thing, I'd keep it full. If you're going to sit it, I'd keep that thing full and cap closed. Definitely.
So before 6 months storage,
Yeah.
fill it,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
and then we're good.
Yep.
Yep. Thanks for mentioning that. I forgot that. Last, guys, any engine, your radiator here, this is going to suck air in, so you're going to want to blow that air back out to get that fine material out. You've got 6 bolts on it. This cover slides up and then gives you direct access to that radiator. Weekly to bi-weekly, clean that radiator off, especially when we hit those 100-degree days. Make sure you're doing that weekly so this engine does not overheat. Same thing for our air filter, guys. I always say a $60 air filter is cheaper than a $20,000 engine. This air filter is dirty, replace the air filter. Caterpillar no longer wants you taking these out and blowing them out. You can take them and tap them lightly. You do have a pressure indicator on this as well. When this air filter is clogged and needs to be replaced, this little spring here is going to pop down. You're going to see a red piece of plastic come up. That's telling you this air filter can't breathe and needs to be replaced. So in that scenario, just replace both air filters. As you guys know, spoonful of dirt in this engine, you just bought yourself a new engine. I think 20,000 is conservative for this engine. Yes, sir.
Just one quick tip on that whole thing about that air. If you're going to commit to opening that, then commit to replacing it. Because if you start to open that thing up, look at it, mess around, I'm going to tap it in, then put it back in, you can't guarantee that you didn't just put a whole bunch of dirt between that filter and the intake. So if you're going to commit, use that indicator and then say, I'm changing that air filter out today because it's part of maintenance, and you open it, wipe it out with a rag, put a new one in, and don't put it back in like that. It's just
filter like the rest of the Bandits filter, where it has one internal, one external.
Any general questions on the machine, guys? Yes,
So-
sir.
Oh, go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, the air filter, I mean, it depends on the conditions, but how often are we going to change that air filter?
Weekly to bi-weekly. Yep. And again, like you said, it's going to depend on conditions. If you're running
But I mean,
real
replace the air
oh no,
filter?
not replace. I would say check weekly to bi-weekly.
they last quite a long time.
They'll last
real long time.
Yeah.
A year?
Not that long. I would say a couple months.
Couple months.
So about the 3 dead switches on the radio control, is there any aftermarket, or do you guys supply any type of end cap that we can take, like, so we could remove the dead switches and put an end cap in place on the radio, just to prevent wear and tear or breakage for possible switches not in use?
I've never seen it done before.
You dig what I'm saying, though, right?
Help me out. So you're saying on the emergency stop?
No. On the
Oh,
radio control
on the
itself.
actual remote. You could take that boot off. That's just a rubber boot protecting it, but then you just have an open metal toggle.
Right, 'cause I figured there'd be some sort of, like,
There might be a dome you can buy. I know what he's talking about. He wants a little dome. I know what he's talking about.
flat cap.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about. I think you can actually.
An idea.
I think you can get those domes and then screwed on there, so it's just a.
It's one less thing to break, one less thing to stick out, one less thing
Right.
to wear.
I'll check with our parts department. I'll let you know.
Thank you.
I'll coordinate that back to Mike. And
Thank you.
Yep. Well, if no other questions, guys, we'll go ahead. I'm gonna plug everything back in. We'll fire it up, get everything up running, and then run the machine a little bit so you guys are familiar with that. So you guys would like to do that?
Yeah.
You said there was some grease points.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. You know, you're 100% right, guys. I did. He just mentioned I skipped over these. You've got 2 little bearings up here. Just a couple shots every day, guys. It's nothing crucial. All that's doing is lubing this plate up so it can slide back and forth, or really just as needed. If you see it's getting tight, just shoot some grease. You got a point there. point there. All of our grease points are going to have caps on them right now from paint back at the factory. So that's what you see up there. Thank you. I skipped over those. All right, guys, I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna fire it up. I'm gonna lock or unlock our feed system, suck our winch in, and then we'll go ahead. We'll engage the clutch, fire it up to running operation, and go over everything. Sound like a good crew. Pretty easy. Let's go. Radio remote on. We're manual now. Radio. We got temperature here. Everything is linked up. We're good to go.